Okay, we can go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our panel on Roots to Medicine event. Um, I'm gonna go ahead and share my slides real quick. Okay. Thank you all for joining us today. So this is a bit of the agenda of what we're going to cover today. So we're going to talk about what exactly a gap year can consist of. We're going to go through introductions for our panelists, Q&A, and then we're going to wrap up afterwards. So the first part of our agenda is to cover what does a gap year consist of. And so here are just some examples of different gap year experiences, most of which have been covered with the panelists that we do have today, which will be super interesting to hear some of the insight and how they navigated their gap year experiences. But some examples of these could be volunteering, shadowing, traveling, paying off college debt, research, post-bac programs, studying for the MCAT, grad school, working, and many others. So here are just some statistics. About 59.9% of matriculating medical students took at least one gap year, and this is from 2015 from the AAMC. And I put a plus after just because we know that number is like rising over time with different lifestyles and everything that's kind of going on. So that's just some reference to know that like it's more common than we may perceive it as. So here's some more statistics on gap years. And this all came from the Gap Year Association via Grad School Hub. And so 80% of students who took a gap year found that they became more culturally competent during that time. And 81% also found that they had grown in terms of maturity during the time of their gap year from like that college to medical school experience. And approximately 89% of gap year students did say that they felt like they were more employable after their gap year. So next, we're gonna dive right on into our panel. So I'm gonna go ahead and introduce our panelists, and then I'll hand it over to Armand for the Q&A portion. So our first panelist is Harrison White. He graduated from Yale University with a degree in political sciences and a concentration in the pre-medical sciences in 2017. He also spent 2 seasons playing professional baseball with the Miami Marlins before going to Georgetown University for a post-bac program. He studied for the MCAT for over a year, and he has amassed countless effective study techniques in each section of the test, actually receiving perfect scores in 3 of those sections. He's currently applying to medical school and going through that entire process as well. Our next panelist is Dr. Maria Bellantoni, and she did her undergraduate at University of Pennsylvania in health policy and economics. After her graduation, she completed a Robert A. Fox Leadership Fellowship working with the medical director of Catholic Charities in New Orleans, and she earned her MD from the U.S. Public Health or from the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences. And in 2018, and while she was in medical school, she was commissioned as an officer for the U.S. Public Health Services Commission Corps. Afterwards, she did her residency in internal medicine and urban health at Johns Hopkins Hospital, where like beyond her clinical training, she pursued specialized training in the care of underserved populations and quality improvement science. And she looks forward to continuing her career as a leader in primary care and healthcare delivery with the U.S. Public Health Service. And she's currently a geriatrics fellow at Johns Hopkins Bayview. So then our next panelist is Arenze O'chuba, and he is currently a second-year Johns Hopkins medical student with an interest in orthopedics. For a little bit of his bio, he moved to America in 2014 and lived on a farm in Illinois. And at that point, he did start community college. After 3 years, he actually transferred to Johns Hopkins for his undergrad and graduated with a degree in neuroscience in 2019. He then worked for the Johns Hopkins Hospital Orthopedic Department as a medical scribe for pediatric and trauma orthopedics. And during that year, He applied and was accepted to the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. And he's currently, like I said, a second-year medical student with an interest in orthopedics and neurosurgery. And in terms of research, his interests are in thoracic outlet syndrome and nerve regeneration. And so his goal is to apply innovative techniques to improving the state of surgery in developing countries. Our next panelist is Francesca Silvestri. She's a second-year medical student at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. She also went to Johns Hopkins University and majored in public health studies, also graduating in 2019. While in undergrad, she was involved in both clinical and non-clinical activities. And after her undergraduate career at Johns Hopkins, she went on to get her MHS in mental health from the Bloomberg School of Public Health in May of 2020. And throughout undergrad and graduate school, her research focused on PrEP for HIV and art care for sexual minority individuals in Baltimore City, and focusing specifically on how stigma and psychological distress can correlate to high sexual risk HIV transmission behaviors. And since starting medical school, she has been involved in a variety of initiatives. Some of the work that she's done has been with a student-run free clinic, working in clinical and non-clinical administrative capacities, as well as her work with the Racism and Bias Initiative, which is a change management system within the medical school to address racism and bias. Additionally, she co-leads the Harm Reduction and Addiction Medicine Interest Group and Family Medicine Interest Group. And she's working on a project in the OBGYN department to evaluate the rollout of a PrEP program, gynecological services at one of the resident-run clinics. And so that's a little bit about her. So next, I'll pass it over to Armand for introducing the Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Evan, for introducing all our speakers, and thank you, speakers, for being here today. Before we go into a free-form Q&A from our audience today, we have a couple of set questions that we'd like to ask all our speakers. So feel free to chime in as we move through the questions. We can either go in a random order or anything that you'd like. So Evan, could you please move on to the next slide? So as I mentioned, we will start off with a couple of general questions for everybody. And the first question is, what was your main reason for taking a gap year? So, or gap years for that matter. So feel free, any of our speakers, to just unmute and share your experiences with us.
I can go first. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
For me, mine depended more on logistics and other factors as well. So I transferred to Hopkins undergrad to finish up my degree, and I had to scuttle along to finish it up in the 2 years that I had intended to. So that didn't give me no chance to apply during my senior year. That was one. Another important factor was I wanted clinical experience, active clinical experience, just so I can understand more about the field, and also other things I would include and consist of. So I saw my own gap year as a way to be able to get that clinical experience and to explore and venture more. I would say those were the big reasons.
I think that's well said. Thank you so much.
I think mine was probably a little bit of what you said, Arenze, and also kind of a desire to, I think, get a little bit more perspective before medical school. So part of it was too logistics. It's just a big process to apply to medical school. It's like a full year of work and effort. And I was doing a lot of things my senior year of college that, I was involved with and didn't, I wanted to put forth a pretty strong effort for medical school. So I figured it made sense to delay. And then what I found was really helpful was, you mentioned, Fevin, I worked for a social services agency essentially for a year, working on sort of the social services aspect of medicine. And I thought that gave me like an incredible perspective it really helped me contextualize what I wanted to do in medicine. And you'll find that practicing medicine is so largely experiential that when you're like sort of in the thick of it, it's hard to come through with another perspective. So it was really helpful, I think, to take a step back and sort of see things from a totally different perspective as a practicing physician. So I think it was a little bit twofold. I think the logistics are very much a legitimate concern. And, you know, I would say the majority of like my friends in college that went on to medical school did not go right from undergrad, but also it doesn't hurt in kind of whatever you do to get to know something else, because medicine is a long road. And again, you won't have like another opportunity necessarily to not think like a physician. And that was kind of fun, and I think was definitely helpful kind of going into the whole process.
Thank you, Dr. Bellantoni. I think it's definitely important that we get some different vast experiences before we do go into medicine.
I'll also just add, hi, this is Francesca. I think going off what everyone said, I think it's also nice just to like have time before starting med school. Like med school is a lot, it's intense. So I think it's totally valid and fair to like do something like non-medical in your gap year and like take time for yourself, because yeah, it is a long road and it's intense.
Awesome. So our next question is, how did you balance being pre-med with outside commitments?
I really want to hear from Harrison on this one, because I feel like playing for Marlins is probably a full-time job.
Yeah, I was just about to jump in. Yes, you're right. Playing sports in college was definitely a full-time job. So basically, before I went to college, I kind of laid out a platform for myself, right? Like college had three basic components for myself. There was a social component, there was the academic component, and there was the athletic component. And I knew that one of those was going to have to take a hit in order for the other two to succeed. And for me, that ended up being the social component. So there were a lot of nights, a lot of weekends where I kind of just put the social life to the side in order to pursue both the athletics and the pre-med track. I actually didn't start my pre-med education until I was a junior in college. So I was a little bit later than probably most people here. And so the last 2 years of my time in college were the busiest, both with being kind of a major contributor to my team and to my pre-medical education. So I think you kind of have to go in, and I know this probably isn't applicable for a lot of people here that are more along the road of their undergraduate career, but nonetheless, I think the lesson of kind of planning and having a game plan still stands. But I kind of went in with the idea that I was going to have to make some sacrifices for things that I wanted to do in terms of things that might be fun, or going out and being social with people that I was trying to make connections with. Those did take some hits. But I think you really have to kind of take a step back and ask yourself what's important to you, right? That's not to say that I wasn't able to, be social and form friendships and form close relationships. I totally was. I just had to be very conscious of my priorities and kind of how I was going to make everything kind of fit together. And I don't think there's necessarily one equation that lends itself to doing that most effectively. I think that's kind of an individual decision and an individual plan. Find something that works for you, find a balance that works for you, and stick with that. And don't deviate from that, and run with it and make it as good as you can make it.
I could jump in next. So in terms of making a balance between being pre-med and with outside commitments, I would be very honest. I'm not the best person to answer this question, but I would still like to share my experience. I'll give you a bit of foreshadowing. So I transferred from community college to Hopkins undergrad. And in those 2 years, I had to try and finish up my degree because of financial reasons, of course, and also like in terms of my own timeline and pre-med as well. So, the pre-med, to fulfill your pre-med dreams, I guess, you have there are several things you want to check off on your list and things that just interest you in general. And I guess looking back at it all now, I would say all of this in terms of making, I'll echo what, I'm sorry, is it Jay Harrison? So sorry. I'll echo what Harrison just said. Um, there's some things that you'd have to make sacrifices on. And I'll slightly augment that saying making the right sacrifices and making the choice ones. Because yeah, you have that main goal in mind of medical school. At the same time, you want to get there in the right state of mind, I guess, and in the right way. So I'll use myself as an example of, I guess, not the best way, and which is I took lots of classes. I didn't have that much time to socialize. I was always busy with volunteering, research, or going from class to class, especially trying to get everything done as quick as possible. And lots of things I really enjoyed doing took a hit. I draw a lot. I didn't have time to draw at all during on my undergrad at Hopkins. And I didn't realize how much that was important to me until like medical school started and I started recalibrating. Or actually, I used my gap here to recalibrate and say, this is important. Why did I shelve this? So I would say, yes, sacrifices will be made. And it's kind of like so harsh and dramatic to say sacrifices, but it's going to happen. But as you're making those sacrifices, prioritize so much the things that you cannot do without, or the things that you know will keep you stronger and keep you going forward. Let's say, for example, if you have this friend, now this friend means that much to you, prioritize that. If you have this activity and that activity means so much to you, maybe like going to the gym, prioritize that. But do so in a way that you realize, okay, I can fulfill that need to do me. But at the same time, I'm still fulfilling my pre-med dreams, if that makes sense.
I would say that's probably also a reason to do a gap year. Because I felt like, especially in undergrad, because there were a lot of fun things going on and like cool experiences. And not like applying to medical school my senior year allowed me to do a lot of really cool things. Present at conferences, like be part of organizations, stuff like that. So it's just something, that the time is a limited resource, and like everyone has said, you gotta decide what's important and prioritize it. You will have plenty of time, and I'll say this again, I tell a lot of people this, you will have plenty of time to do clinical medicine when you are in medical school, residency, and for the rest of your life. Do things that make you excited and happy and that make you an interesting person. Because I think that's, again, your time to be able to do those things later on gets smaller and smaller. And life doesn't necessarily get easier as you go along the track. So I would say just, think about what makes you happy and just kind of a well-rounded person and sort of prioritize that way.
I would echo
Yeah,
what Dr. Bellantoni just said. Ooh, sorry. Just echoing. Completely agree.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have nothing to add, echoing what everyone else says.
Thank you so much. Bevan, can we go to the next slide, please? So the third question we'd like to ask our speakers for today, is there anything you would change about your experience this far?
I think in general, for me, something that I would probably do differently if I could go back and do it again is just to get started on pretty much everything a little bit earlier than I thought I needed to. You know, they mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that I'm currently applying to school, and that's true. It's a medical school. And I think that that process in itself is, like Dr. Bellantoni said, it's so much work. It takes up so much time, so much energy, so much effort. And so the more time that you can give yourself to do that, the less stressful it's going to be. And then I think that theme, you know, probably carries itself on throughout the rest of your career, right? Like, just to get started on things earlier than you think you need to, be prepared for things to go wrong, for wrenches to be thrown into your plans, and have kind of backup options, you know, have ways that you can kind of get around things that might go wrong. And thinking ahead, I think, is incredibly important throughout this entire process, and will be throughout your career as a physician. So I think that theme is applicable now and will continue to be applicable throughout all of our careers. So I think that's something that, number one, is important to practice, and number two, will make the whole process a little bit less stressful.
I think for me, I don't know how helpful this is. I kind of wish I traveled more. And like, yeah, I wish I traveled more, and like I kept putting it off to like, so I did my like master's program from 2019 to 2020, and Bloomberg has quarter system. So like March 2020, that like fourth term was when I was supposed to have off, and I'm like, oh, like I'll have off then, and like have the whole summer to travel, but then COVID happened. So I think being intentional about like taking time for yourself and like going on vacation, like experiencing things that you wanted to, is also important. You have like people have mentioned before, like you have your whole life to study medicine and like clinical medicine and have those experiences, but you can't ever get back like different life experiences you wish you had. And I feel like those kind of like inform your experience in medicine, like experiencing different cultures and that experiential, like I keep saying experiences a lot, but yeah, like that kind of informs your clinical care too, and like how you can relate to patients and relate to people. And I think that's really invaluable that you can't learn in a classroom.
Thank you, speakers. The fourth and final question in the planned questions for our speakers is, what support systems did you rely on during your journey, whether that was at your home or at an institution that you were at? Could you please share that experience with us?
I can get a ball rolling on this one. So for me, my family is my biggest support system. I call my sister, I call my mom, I call my brother to talk about stuff. In making my decisions, in fact, I think there was a time when I was trying to decide, should I take only 1 or 2 gap years? And my mom was like, Arenze, you can do it. And my mom was Nigerian, so my mom was like, big on knowledge, you can do it, you can do it. So yeah, so like you need that juice, man. You need that support. You need someone to just like tell you can do it. And there's other those support systems as well. I would say that I should have tapped into more of them. But I'm a big one on things like writing. So my writing sucks. I know this, and so I go and I solicit or I ask for advice from everyone I can find. And so I used a tremendously amount of resources from Hopkins. They had some career advising systems. They had some writing services, and I would just go there, and I had like how many drafts of personal statements. It's just because my writing isn't, I guess, most succinct or beautiful. So I relied on stuff like that. other things, just having people around you and trying to figure out those that like genuinely care and that can genuinely like inspire you. That's more of a difficult thing because everyone has their own I won't say agendas because that sounds so dubious, but everyone has their own main goal and that might not include you, and that's okay. Doesn't mean that they're evil or bad people. It's just that there's some people who would actually say, yeah, I know you, I like you, and I want you to succeed. And in fact, I found a person that actually felt that way so strongly. She was like, I know you, I like you, I know you can do this. I'm gonna help you out as much. And really just trying to find the right people. And that would take some digging and take some looking. But the ones you find, hold on to them so much and so much appreciation as you move forward.
Couldn't agree with you more, Arenze. I like purposefully went to residency very close to my parents and in-laws because I think they kept me alive with like food and sustenance for the better part of my intern year. So if that's an option for you, highly recommend. But one thing I'll say is I think you realize as you go through different parts of your careers that you start collecting mentors and you may not like formally describe them as that or like say, oh, like you're my mentor, but there'll be people, professors, colleagues that kind of influence the way you think and influence, what you want to do when you grow up. And I think it's really important to keep them up to date on your life. That's one thing I didn't necessarily appreciate until a little bit later, but people like that who have made an impact, I think really like knowing what you're up to, and they really like continuing to influence you. And I think it's kind of a demonstration of kind of their worth to you. And I think it's really nice to acknowledge that in a meaningful way. And just email now is like so easy, or texting, but as you kind of move through different stages and move to different parts of the world, just make sure that you like keep in touch with folks. I know that sounds ridiculous, but you'll get really busy and you'll be like more excited to sleep for 2 hours than anything else at some point in your clinical career. And it's just important, I think, to be really intentional about that. Because at some point down the line too, I think people, when you need advice or when you need thoughts about something, having kind of established those relationships and keeping them fruitful, I think will certainly pay off for both people. So that's something, I guess that answers number 3 too. That's something that I probably would have changed. There are several people that I wish I had kept better in touch with as I went through like different things.
One thing I'll mention too that I found different from undergrad to med school is the institutional support. Like I felt like there was a big shift when I got to med school in support of like fostering not only like surviving through med school, but like thriving. Like I feel like there's so many barriers to get you into med school, but once you get into med school, they really want you to become a doctor. So I feel like that was really refreshing, and like all the support, whether that be like academic, wellness, financial, like social. So they're really like rooting for you and doing well and making sure like you are well through that process.
I think that's beautifully said. Thank you so much for all your inputs. So I guess this is the end of our planned sort of Q&A. We're now opening up the floor to our audience. So if you have any questions for our speakers today, feel free to unmute yourself and introduce yourself and ask your question, or you can send your question to me in the chat and I can shuttle those to our speakers.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ziad. I'm a sophomore at Hopkins. And I had a quick question that's kind of related to gap years, but also MCAT. Just wanted to ask, what was everyone's approach to taking the MCAT and how they factored that in terms of their gap years, and whether they took the full year to study or just a couple of months, and if you did that with like activities at the same time, or just how you approach that in general?
I'm trying to remember because it's been a while. But and I think the MCAT I took is also like was scored completely differently than it is now. Like I don't even know what the MCAT looks like anymore. But I took it twice, once as a senior in college, and then again at the end of my first gap year. And it definitely was easier after my first gap year when I I studied while I was working, but probably for the like 2 months before it, I did a more intensive study period, and that seemed to work kind of well. But I think you can probably do it a lot of ways. I would just say it probably just takes like a little bit of lead up time of like a lot of focus to and practice. Honestly, it's just a lot of practice, I think. But I think whatever you have going on in your life, you can make it work. But that was just what I did.
So yeah, kind of in the spirit of what I was talking about earlier, I also took the MCAT twice. The first time around, I studied for about 5 months, and I felt like I had a decent understanding of the test, kind of walking into the room on test day the first time. Got an okay score, but I wasn't like thrilled about my score, and I knew that I could do better. So the second time around, I really focused on my weaknesses. Still did kind of concentrate a little bit on what I was good at and made sure that that was still kind of up to par, but really focused on my weaknesses. And spent another good 6 or 7 months studying for the second time around. I think my experience of actually sitting down for the test and taking it the first time, knowing what that was like, and then translating that into both my studies and my preparation for that was really helpful. From the first time I took the test to the second time I took the test, I had, I think, like a 9-point score increase. So it was like pretty significant. And I think a lot of that came from just the experience of kind of going through it twice. I don't know why, but it seems like a lot of undergrads kind of are scared to take the exam twice, and I don't think you should be. It doesn't reflect poorly on you as a pre-med student, right? Like in your application, if you show one score and then your next score is several points higher, that I think that actually reflects very well on your ability to kind of reflect on, your performance the first time and then improve on that. So I wouldn't be scared to take it, twice if you feel like you need to do that. And in fact, for me, I think that was part of the reason that I did so well the second time. But again, just kind of like being prepared for that moment as far in advance as you can, as you feasibly can, and kind of making that work for you in terms of what you have going on academically, socially, in your work life, whatever it is, just kind of making that schedule fit with whatever is going on in your life, having a lot of foresight and kind of seeing what needs to come in the future, right? So over the next couple of years for you, you might start thinking about studying for the MCAT, in your junior year, depending on when you want to apply. If you want to take a gap year, start kind of thinking about things like that. And then kind of approach the test and preparation for the test kind of from that perspective with all of that context around it, because I think that's super important.
Yeah, I would just add, I think the first step in like approaching the MCAT is thinking about when you want to apply. So then that infers like when you want to take it. And then when you need to register, and like there's some logistics about like it only opens in January for like the year. So that's like something to keep note of when you want to register for the test. I think also too, outside of like studying, if you should also like, or I strongly encourage applying for the fee assistance program if like money is an issue too. They cover, I think, half of the MCAT, and they cover 20 primary applications and they waive all secondary application fees. So that's like a huge, like it relieves like a lot of financial burden. And then also in terms of approaching the MCAT, I took it twice as well. At the first time I took it the summer before my senior year, so August before my senior year, and then I didn't really like my score. And then I studied again like during class, which for me, I'm like, I feel like I do really poorly with like having a lot of free time. So I need kind of to have more structure. So I think it's all just like about figuring out the best way that you study. And so the second time I took it was in April, like right before, and I did much better. But I would probably set like a solid, like, I don't know, like 4 months of studying, with like the last, maybe like first two being like content review and the last two being like more like intense like doing questions, and like strongly recommend the actual AMC like official practice material. They have like their whole like full length exams and then like question packs for the different sections. Like I like those aren't optional, you should do those. And then in terms of like which outside resource you want to do, like I think it depends on like how you are. I know Kaplan is it's like more detailed, and they have more questions. I personally used Exam Crackers, which I thought was fine. They're more condensed, and I feel like they have good like high yield material, but you might not have as much of like the periphery information that you need. But like I guess it depends on like your goal. Like those might have more of those like obscure questions that'll get you like the higher scores. What else? Yeah, I wouldn't get too caught up on a score. Like full transparency, like my MCAT score was like very low compared to the Sinai average. So like I would not count yourself out for just because you have like a certain score. It's all about like the whole package when it comes to like the application.
I can round up and add my own, like I say, 2 cents. So in my case of studying, I actually planned to take the MCATs after, like during the winter, but then something happened, I had to postpone it. And I took it while I was graduating. Like on the first day after graduation, I took the exam. So for me, I think I'll echo everything everyone has said. And one thing that I realized like going through studying is that I guess in my own preference, I'm kind of one that pays attention to the price tag. So that kind of pushes me away from like these curated and polished programs that give you a price for the full thing. I know I'm not one with the cash flow, so I try to like find other ways to make my studying possible. And one thing I'm learning right now, and I still keep learning, is that it's useful to have a dedicated study material. I mean, right now, Francesca and I were probably doing this. We're thinking about step one, and we're like, it's going to come. I think I'm going to try and implement the same tactics I use, in that have a dedicated material that you know front and back. Let that be like your Bible of that exam. My Bible of MCAT was a Kaplan book I got for free from online. And when I knew I was well versed with that, anything that book lacked, then I supplemented with with other resources. And of course, cars is a big topic. And I'll just say briefly that my cars sucked. So I was supposed to take the exam in December, and I was about to take it, and I was still scoring so low in cars. I was like, tension. So after I took that time off because the exam was canceled on my day when I was going to take it, I tried to go about my style of taking the exam. And I'm not like an MCAT guru. I'm just going to be like, for that exam, for the cars especially, the questions that you're being asked come in a few defined formats. And people have taught this course or taught this cars in different ways. And I found something online on Med Student Network, student student doctor network that helped me, it said that you can see questions that just ask you for what is this. You can see questions that ask you to infer. You can see questions that ask you to clarify or something like that. And after I realized all of these are just one formula, but just like a derivative of the question, I knew how to identify and then postulate and make the best, choose the best option. And my cars was actually surprisingly good because I had trained and answered several questions, so I could read quickly and I could get through it quickly. But one thing I'll just say one thing I'll say is for the fee assistance program, please do that. Do it so much. That's important. They really set you up. After you're done with the MCAT, they're like, here, 20 schools. We are literally like removing, I don't know, like $1,000 or something from your costs. Do it. Do it. Like I'm gonna say it a third time just to make an emphasis, because if you didn't hear it the last two times, do it. Okay, I think you got it this time.
Just for context, so that everyone knows, I don't know if this is kind of common knowledge or not, but for the med school application is two parts: the primary application and the secondary application. For the primary applications, it's somewhere between like $60 and $100 per school just to send that primary applications to schools. And then the secondary applications can kind of range anywhere from like 75, I think was the cheapest that I saw, to $110, $120. So if you're applying to 30 schools, you're spending $3,000, $4,000 on the application process. It's a lot of money. So the fee assistance program is a must. You should definitely apply for that.
Do it.
And then one last thing I'll add about studying for the MCAT is I feel like our learning specialist here has even said this when I'm like thinking about studying for step 2, but I know it can be overwhelming when you have all these outside resources and figuring out which one you want to use. But I would say find the one that you think works best with your like learning style and sticking to that, or finding the resource that you will use most consistently, because whatever you use most consistently is what's going to help you learn the material. So don't be stressed about like, oh, I got to watch this Khan Academy video and you do these UWorld questions and like read the Kaplan textbook, but find whatever resource that you think is most helpful for you and you can do most consistently. I think that'll help with learning the material the most.
Thank you. That was all very helpful information. Appreciate it.
Yeah, do it.
Got it.
Hi, my name is Faith. I'm also a sophomore in undergrad, and I just had a question regarding how you thought your gap year experiences may or may not have helped you in the interview, like during the interviewing process of applying to medical school.
I think insofar as it like gave me something to talk about, like, what I did and why I thought it was interesting, why I thought I was a better person for doing it. I think, they realize that there are logistical issues with applying to medical school. So you don't necessarily have to have done something like super profound in your gap year, but I think they just want to like genuinely know what you were up to and kind of how that fit into your life. So, I worked for Catholic Charities New Orleans, and we did essentially like one of the first hotspotting programs for high ED utilizers. And that was like really cool. Like here I was like a 21-year-old, who like was thrown into the middle of like a really cool project that gave me a lot of insight, and it was like really fun to talk about. So, like I said, you don't necessarily have to do something like really profound to make it worthwhile or meaningful. I think just finding what's interesting about your gap year, because they're definitely going to want to know just what you're doing. And again, it's more, there's no like box check necessarily. It's just like out of curiosity and, kind of what makes you you. So I think doing anything honestly is helpful insofar as it just kind of gives them some context about you and you as a person.
Yeah, I think just echoing off of that. So I did like a master's program in my gap year, and technically that wasn't like on my application because I submitted my application like right after I graduated, and I was doing the master's program in that year. So it was really more of like when I was providing updates, because a lot of the secondaries will ask you like, what have you done since you submitted? Or I think it's submitted, not graduated, but yeah, what have you done since you submitted? And so I would talk about that. So yeah, I think it was like just a point of conversation of like what I'm doing now. And a lot of them would be like, oh, like that's cool, you're doing like a master's in like public health. Like, how do you think that's gonna like inform how you want to like be a physician, or like what do you want to do in your career? So it's more of just like a conversation point and like how I wanted to like integrate that moving forward.
Actually, relax again. Fake, could you tell me what the question was?
Yeah, so I was just wondering how your gap year experiences may have like benefited you during the interviewing process when you had to like, kind of like have conversations with admissions for medical school.
Yeah, okay. So for me, I would say I was really like happy with my experience and how that was easy for me to translate. I worked as a medical scribe, and it was there I got a bountiful amount of clinical experience just in the seeing patients alongside the doctor. And really, I guess I could just say most of the questions that were directed towards me, I could start with the prefix. From my experience as a medical scribe, from my experience as a medical scribe, in my experience as a medical scribe, yeah, I know it's like a catch-all, but I really felt that I could immerse myself in that experience and then draw from it. And so I found it super useful, found it super effective. But there's just one thing. They, I think it helps a lot because they can relate with you. For example, I remember one of my interviewers, she described to me how annoying Epic is. Epic is a recording system. She's like, I have to spend my weekends going through notes and clicking buttons and stuff. She was so pissed. And I was like, yeah, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. We were vibing. It was a thing. We had agreements. But again, I can't go outside of that medical school, that scribing experience. I could say other things that I just did for my own personal sake because I just liked it. I drew a lot. During my time traveling the country for my interviews, I hiked to most of my places where I had to go do the interview. I got lost at Boston. It wasn't fun because it was cold that night. I don't want to talk about it, but like yeah, it was. I guess there are advantages and disadvantages, but you just have to shine through your experience and what you loved about it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much for all your responses. Very helpful to hear.
Do we have any other questions in the chat? If not, I have one question for all our speakers today. So how did you decide why you wanted to do medicine, and was it an epiphany moment or a bunch of experiences over time that kind of informed your decision to go into medicine?
I could go first. I think this question is great because you all are going to answer the same questions in your personal statements. So get ready. It's a fun question to try and digest and understand. Everyone has your own reason. And I think I guess it's okay to share our own personal reasons, I guess, but at the same time I don't want to actually guess remove from your own epiphany and journey and reflection of why you're considering and why you're interested in medicine. I know you've probably heard all these common things like don't do it for the prestige or money or any of those things. Yeah, don't do it because like you can get rich any other way, and you can get prestige any other way. People are doing it on TikTok. You can get prestige through that too. But in terms of why, your why, it's really strong. this is a very important question. The primary, your primary application. Um, and you have to dig down. Mine was a combination of several experiences that I had. Some people have that like flash bulb moments. And yes, I use flash bulb memory stuff like from the MCATs. Everyone who's doing MCAT stuff knows what I'm talking about. But that flash bulb moments when something happens and you're like, oh, I need to do this. I would say I had something like that, but I would say it was more of going through this, going through this, going through this. I already knew from a young age that I really was interested in medicine. And I would say that, yeah, I wanted to go ahead and do it. But at the same time, I also say that it was experiences that happened and happened and happened. And this helped me create my personal statements. Because I talked about this moment that was important. And then afterwards, experiences that I had that helped me decide and helped and fortified my reason. I'll give one experience. One time I was volunteering at there's a child, I think it's called a house for kids where patients, children can stay while they're undergoing operations. It's like something that where patient they can stay for free compared to just having to like get like a hotel or something. And I would go there to volunteer on Friday nights. Think about it, Friday nights after going through your whole week. But yeah, and it was great because I could meet so much. I could meet a diverse group of people, have conversations, talk, do something I love, drawing, but at the same time do something where I can just learn from everyone else and make an impact. And there was this girl who we were drawing together, her hands were just shaking this much. And I was like, oh, what's going on? Um, the mom came over, sat her on her lap, and we all continued drawing together. And in that intimate moment, mom shared with me, my daughter just underwent a hemispherectomy. All my neuroscience bros and gals out there, a hemispherectomy is when you're having seizures, untractable or intractable seizures that cannot be, I guess the epicenter is too large or something. One hemisphere is removed, resected. At a young age, I guess you have a greater chance of recovery or sustaining some functions. It's a huge operation. And this kind of hit me so hard because I just learned about that about like 2 weeks ago in my neuroscience courses. And then I saw how that correlated here. At the same time, I could just see the unity that mom and child had. Because afterwards, they said to me, the doctors, before then, she couldn't actually even do anything. She had how many seizures a day? It was so hard. The doctors said that after the operation, we could actually have a chance. They were shining. Let me put it that way. What I saw was so much hope. I felt that hope in my personal life. Every time I did something related to medicine, I felt that hope. When I went to go shadow neurosurgeons, I felt that hope. And when I did research, I could see that hope sometimes. When the study works, sometimes it didn't work. But yeah, that was for me the crux of my own reason. I saw medicine as a way for hope. And now I'm not going through this using like a rosy eye glass or something. Of course, there are difficulties that you cannot control. But I just saw it as a way where I could express and at least try and give other people the hope I felt.
That's hard to follow, but what I'll say is I think when you're deciding what you want to do with your life, there are probably like 3 aspects of like your being that you need to satisfy. So like one is like your emotional, like what makes you happy. There's certainly like the intellectual side, you know, what do you find interesting, what like excites you, and then the third is sort of the philosophical side, right? Like how do you reconcile, you know, your existence in the world, or like what you want to do and like what makes sense to the world. And I think for me, like medicine hit all 3 of them. I think, and most importantly, it appealed to my philosophical side, saying like, yeah, this is like, I can think of nothing more important that I want to do with my life. And I think that's really important because as you guys have heard time and time again, and I know my co-panelists have experienced, it's a lot of work and can be very challenging at times and make you question if this is really in line with your philosophical side. But I think what kind of keeps us going through it is realizing that yeah, this like it makes sense to me at kind of like a very core of my being. So I think you really have to like have that inner conversation with yourself to make sure that it fits with what you want to do. There are a lot of things I think that are really important in the world. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of ways to be meaningful and impactful. But for me, like this is just what made sense.
I think, oh, sorry, going off that, I can be really quick. I think for me, like also, yeah, it also like checked all those boxes for me too. And I think something still that I'm exploring is that there's like so many aspects to medicine outside of just patient care. And I feel like what's been really interesting for me is exploring that side and exploring like, I feel like I like to look at things in very like health systems level. And I feel like getting like an MD or MD and like another degree like really allows you to like use your clinical knowledge to explore those other aspects of medicine. So that's been really exciting. And I feel like that was like a going into medicine, like, and even going through med school, like made me realize like I just don't have to be a clinician and I can explore other like intellectual curiosities in that way.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that was super helpful for me and for everyone here as well. I'd like to turn it over to Fevin now, who will finish up.
Yeah, so we just have a couple of announcements left, including the winners of the giveaway from our conference. So I'll go ahead and share my screen again real quick. Okay, so like for those of you who were at our conference, we had a giveaway, and so here are the winners of the giveaway. There's a mix of Hopkins and non-Hopkins people, and we really appreciate everyone coming to our inaugural JHU Maps conference in our partnership with Jump and SNMA. And so here are the winners of the water bottles, the sweatshirts, the 3-month UWorld subscriptions, and the double AMC sample test packs. Either us or the like affiliates from Jump, Dr. Wynn, and Mrs. Brooms will be in contact in terms of figuring out how to distribute those prizes. But we'll also definitely send these out in the slides as well. And the last thing that I want to cover was thank you to all of our amazing panelists. You guys have come from literally all walks of life, and we are so happy to have you with us and provide such like amazing feedback and just great advice that we can all use on our journeys as well, and deciding whether or not we should take a gap year or different opportunities, such as maybe going into something related to the military or maybe master's programs, scribing, as well as sports as well. So with that said, thank you so much for joining us. And we will be following up with all of our panelists.
Can I make a quick,
yeah, go ahead.
Interrupting Kevin. Well,
No
Harrison,
problem.
do you also want to share your why as well? Because I didn't hear that. And because you've gone so far in this process, and I know I'm taking us back, and I'm sorry, but I'm curious because you're so cool. And I actually think you're cool. That's it. End of story.
Yeah, so my why I think was kind of similar to what a lot of other people have expressed already. It was a combination of you know, a process kind of throughout my development and throughout my life, and having a couple of, like you said, Arenze, the kind of like flashbulb moments. Couple of them that were like super close to home, right? Like my dad was hospitalized for a month and a half at one point, and I was waking up every morning like truly wondering, is my dad gonna make it through the day today? You know, and so kind of having those experiences, while they are horrible in the moment, they can be super formative. And thankfully for me, my dad, you know, got through that and ended up being okay. But I think it's important to take kind of everything into account on your road to medicine, if that's what you choose to do, to kind of embrace the day-to-day. I don't want to call it a struggle because it shouldn't be a struggle, but sometimes it really is, right? Like embrace the day-to-day journey. There are going to be hard times, like everyone here has said, But as long as you keep the perspective and as long as you kind of have that internal motivation, you know, to really accomplish the things that you want to accomplish and to focus in on why specifically medicine can help you accomplish those, I think is something that you can't really replace. Arenze, I loved your answer about feeling hope, because I think medicine in particular, and maybe this is something that someone can use in their interviews or primary applications or secondary applications or whatever, but I think medicine in particular just offers such a unique aspect of hope that not really a lot of other fields, if any other fields, can offer. And that's something that should probably speak to you if you think that this is a field for you. And so, you know, hopefully someone can use that. Hopefully someone kind of resonates with that idea. But yeah, like I said, for me, the journey and the decision to pursue medicine was a combination of a couple of kind of key moments, kind of in conjunction with the general development of liking science, liking medicine, treating patients during my gap year, kind of all of those things lumped together.
Thank you for sharing that, Harrison. That was a really just nice way to tie everything together and wrap everything up. So again, thank you to all of our panelists. Be sure to follow us on social media for any info on upcoming events. Our Instagram is below. And we also have our YouTube channel where you can watch recordings from previous events, such as this one, as well as the conference, which we will be uploading in the next week or so. And for those who are affiliated with Hopkins, you can connect your JHU account to GroupMe, and you can find us on their Republic account under Campus Connect. And the last thing I want to mention is that we are opening freshman representative applications, and those will be due next Friday, October 22nd at 11:59. And I believe someone should be dropping the link in the chat soon if they haven't already. With that said, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Sorry we went a little bit over, but thank you to all of our panelists and have a good night.